You guys good? So this is a really important topic to me because I study diabetes, and generally when you look at any sort of treatment plan that involves type 2 diabetes, it's going to be diet, exercise, and medication. So it's really important to examine what is the food climate in the areas that I'm in, and in the areas that I'm in along the 110 corridor and in Northeast LA, you definitely have some issues with food deserts and food swamps. I'm actually talking about both because I always thought of food swamps when I was using the word food deserts, the words food deserts. So the Amber Waves article really goes into this and defines it, but just in case, food deserts are these low-income neighborhoods where residents live more than 1 mile from a supermarket. And the 1 mile is important because when you go shopping, if you want to buy more than food for that day, you're going to have to transport your groceries from wherever you purchase them home, especially if you're not a single person and you're living with a family. So the distance really matters. In addition to that, in these areas, there's limited access to transportation, which is a barrier to this affordable and nutritious food. We'll talk a little bit more about transportation and physical barriers, but we're not just talking about inadequate bus routes or, let's see, maybe there's a big 110 freeway that's going right between where your house is and where the Food Express is, which is exactly what it's like on Alameda Street, just in case you're familiar with that area. Or maybe it's not even safe for you to walk through a certain area that you're living in to get to the place that you would normally buy groceries, so you have to look for some other alternatives. The reason this is important is because food expenditures increase as your income rises, which is one of the reasons you're going to see Whole Foods and Mother's and grocery stores like that in more affluent areas, because I'm willing to pay $3.95 a pound for organic cauliflower, right? Maybe I'm not going to in a different neighborhood. But that's the problem, because if you know that these are low-income neighborhoods, what's the incentive for these corporations to expand food access in an area? If they know they're not going to be able to get top value for this new store, if they know that this is generally a dense urban area, where are they going to find the land, not just for the store, but for parking? But are they going to get a reasonable return on their investment? Because this is a business. Food is a business. It's a huge, big business in our country, so it's something you have to kind of think about. So I always thought that food swamps were food deserts because this is kind of what I'm familiar with. I grew up like Eagle Rock, Highland Park, but my family lives in Huntington Park, and I'm familiar with that area. And this is often what it looks like. And I kind of knew that these things weren't good for us, so I interpreted them as not being a place to eat. There's nowhere to eat. There's nowhere to shop. There's nowhere to get anything healthy. If you're telling me to get a salad, where am I going to get a salad? But really, this isn't a food desert. This is a food swamp. You're literally wading through, this easy access to healthy food, and you have to consciously avoid fast food, liquor stores, and convenience stores, despite the fact that they're cheaper and you're hungry, right? So it's there, and you have to kind of navigate it. These options are more convenient. They're cheaper. They require less time to prepare the food. You don't even prepare it, basically. You order it, it's delivered to you, or you just open a package. And why does that matter? Well, it matters if you're working a long day. It matters if you're a student and you're on your way home. It matters when it comes to the size of your family and what your actual food budget is. So there's a lot of different factors we're going to talk about. But why do I care about food deserts and food swamps? I care because when I'm in a research conference and it's specifically about diabetes, there are the people who look at genetic factors, and you can't downplay that. That's really important. There are issues in my personal family and community that are going to make me predisposed to diabetes, so that's important to me. But only 60% of it is genetic factors. And 40% is actually, how are you living? What is your environment like? Are you able to exercise? Can you access or follow these recommendations made by a nurse practitioner? Because if you can't, that's important, because ultimately it's almost equal as far as what your outcome is. Plus, it's so appealing. These things are so delicious. And if you grow up with this kind of food, it changes your taste buds and it changes your perception of what food is. Because it's incredibly hard to get a kid to not eat McNuggets if they've been eating McNuggets. I'm telling you this from experience, right? So it's something to think about. And it's really advertised. So just another piece there. So this is a video that I think probably you saw. I want to play 3 minutes of it because I found it to be incredibly powerful. And it really was about, if you have under $20 and you have a family of 4, what are your realistic options?
Hi, rodeos. Cheeseburger.
Okay.
2 chicken sandwiches. 2 small drinks. Give me a large Dr. Pepper.
11:48.
Thank you.
We didn't even think about a healthy eating because we used to think everything was healthy.
Thank you. You too. Thank you very much.
Now that I know that the food is really unhealthy for us, I feel guilty giving it to my kids. But we don't have time to cook because we leave at 6. We don't get home until 9, 10, 9. When you have only $1 to spend and you have 2 kids to feed, either you go to the market and try to find something that's cheap, or just go straight through a drive-through and get 2 small hamburgers for them. And, okay, here, eat them. This is what's going to fill her up, not of that one single item at the market.
Look at the broccoli. Too expensive, man.
What did you want to eat then? First, check to see how many are there for a pound. Not. You'd only get like 2 or 3. You can find candy that's cheaper. You can find chips that are cheaper. The sodas are really cheap. Sometimes you look at a vegetable and say, okay, well, we can get 2 hamburgers over here for the same amount of price.
Why is it that you can buy a double cheeseburger at McDonald's for 99 cents and you can't even get a head of broccoli for 99 cents? We've skewed our food system to the bad calories, and it's not an accident. I mean, the reason that those calories are cheaper is because those are the ones who are heavily subsidized. And this is directly tied to the kind of agriculture that we're practicing and the kind of farm policies we have. All those snack food calories are the ones that come from the commodity crops, from the wheat, from the corn, and from the soybeans. By making those calories really cheap, that's one of the reasons that the biggest predictor of obesity is income level.
I love that. The biggest predictor of obesity is income level. Whew. That actually just upset me watching that. What does that mean?
My name is Greg Bird.
Mean that
2 days after graduation.
Does it mean that people who aren't making as much money don't deserve as many options? Maybe. I'm not even going to say that that's not true, right? I don't believe it, but maybe it's true. Or maybe it would be more true if there wasn't fundamental inequality that kind of prevents groups from even being in that position, right? Why is it that Mexican Americans have this rate of diabetes, right? Why is it that there aren't grocery stores in these areas? Those are the questions I want to ask, because it's more than just giving them access. We have to unwind to the beginning of how are you inculcated? How are you really educated? How have you been directed from very little? You saw that little girl. And how have you been told repeatedly that certain things aren't worth it? AKA, you don't deserve it. That's not for you, right? Because research has shown that just changing the access doesn't change what people do. And that's really scary to me, but it's something I need to come to terms with as a researcher. Because if I get all of this funding and all of these donations to open a Fresh and Easy in a neighborhood where it hasn't been, like the one that was in at the end of Division, right? I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with this area. This was a real experimental thing. They opened a big Fresh and Easy there, and it went out of business in 2 years. Because it's not about just saying, here you go, have some broccoli. It's about, is this even acceptable? Do you know what kale is, and do you even know how to cook it, right? Is my family going to eat this stuff? Am I wasting money? So the acceptability is important. Yes?
So can I just clarify the point you were trying to make about
even it's not acceptable. And the guy in the film was saying that we subsidize wheat and corn, and so that means that the government pays farmers whether an automatic price for their crop, regardless if it's good or bad. They're going to make money on growing corn, and then that corn gets made. One of its main products from corn is corn syrup, which is sugary syrup, and we know from research it's very bad for the human body. But you said earlier that your taste buds change.
Yeah, this is important. How many people know that we can't actually eat the corn that's produced? That it's not designed to be consumed directly as corn, and so it's generally turned into molasses or sugar, some sort of sugar product, and added to these products. And this kind of goes back to the how are you raised and inculcated. If you grow up eating these sugary cereals or anything basically that is not on the periphery of the grocery store, all of the middle aisles, which is where the cheaper, like more bang for your buck food is, all of a sudden I can't eat something that's not hyper sweet and really enjoy it, right? There's certain like pleasure sensors that are built in, right, that are actually neurally developed that are telling me that I'm not satisfied with that type of food. So it's not that kids won't eat, dry toast. Of course a kid will eat dry toast. But if you give that kid their entire life that toast with Nutella on it, which one do you think they're going to want to eat? And are they going to feel like the food that maybe is traditional, maybe is more healthy, is the same satisfying experience? It's probably not. And one of the reasons I went out of my way to show those ads for the hamburgers and stuff is that stuff delicious. I'm vegetarian. I didn't really eat a big lunch. And seeing the stuff that popped up actually made my mouth water. I was over there going like, oh, that does look good. Because it's scientifically designed to create that response in us as a way of supporting the way our agriculture, not just the system, but how our policies have been written. So there's a lot going on here. I don't want to flood you with it, but I'll be here at break. And if you want to stay in contact with me, I'm happy to talk to you guys about any of this. My last little piece is there are great classes offered here at UCLA in other departments, and I highly recommend that you look at community health sciences and some of those places to augment your nursing education because they have a lot of information on public health. So it's not just, is this acceptable, right? But is this sold within walking distance of my house? What sort of access do I have to have? Is this going to be a problem? Am I going to be able to get a pound bag of rice and then also all the vegetables that I need to make stir fry and like reasonably get them home and be able to store them? I will tell you that I didn't always have a refrigerator in my home, not when I was growing up, but when I was first married. I was between like 26 and 28, I didn't even own a refrigerator because we couldn't afford it. So it's not unusual to realize that there are accessibility issues that are out there that you do probably benefit from asking when you're actually interacting with the patient. Affordability. This is the main one. If a hamburger costs less than a head of broccoli and I still have to cook it, which means paying my gas bill and paying my electric bill and maybe owning the pots and pans and buying the oil and the salt, garlic salt or whatever you put in broccoli, right? Why would I even do that? That's crazy. I've got stuff to do. I'm like crackerjack timing, getting between my job, which, by the way, may not be anywhere near my neighborhood. Because if I have a good job, but I'm from a low-income community, what's the likelihood that job is actually where I'm living? Am I walking to work? Am I biking to work? Probably not, right? So there's all of these different facets of people's lives that we do have to think about before we just say, like, well, here's some subsidy for you to go to this great store. Help yourself. So to get a little deeper, I tried to categorize these topics for you and pull them out according to the articles that were assigned. So this is the Tuttle article, and this is really about the fast food trends, trying to get you to spend more, because that's the trick. What are some of the reasons that there's 99-cent menus at fast food restaurants? Does anybody want to throw out an idea? Yeah, go ahead.
I get to pull into the building or into the store so that they can try one.
Absolutely. And then, Mom, can I have a Frosty? Right? Like, that's going to happen. Or, I'm 6'4", and I'm not going to survive on a big and tasty burger. Like, I know they're 99 cents, and I've been buying 3 of them, but maybe I'll just buy the meal, right? So who's likely to purchase off these menus? I mean, I think we saw that. But I think the real answer is, like, anybody. Anybody at all. But is everybody equally at risk? of this obesity issue or of the diabetes issue. So that's already kind of a problem. And I'm being really generous when I say anybody, because I haven't eaten fast food in many years, but I'm finally in a place where I can afford not to. That's the main difference in my life. So there's that. And what are the results of purchasing off a 99-cent menu? Pros and cons? Well, let's be fair. People need to eat. And this was a big issue in South Central when they were talking about limiting the location of different fast food restaurants in relation to certain schools. They were saying, it had to be a 5-mile space between a public school and a fast food place. Where are people going to eat? Are you going to put them in a situation where they get nothing? We have to talk about the fact that sometimes this is the reality, and sometimes it is an option. Cons, of course, it's that sugar kind of neurochemical response that gets you to say, like, this is yummy, but I'm still kind of hungry, and I think I'm hungry in an hour. If you're a diabetic person and you go and have a Big Mac meal, it is going to increase your blood sugar, and that's really great. But if you have soda or you have anything else with it, it's going to immediately, precipitously drop it. And then you're going to need to eat something again, or you're in trouble. So there is not only mental impact of always having these choices kind of right there in your mind, but there's also the physiological impact of making these sort of dietary decisions that will follow you not just in your daily short term, but years down the line, which is why we're seeing this real disproportionate diabetes, heart disease, cancer, etc. All right, so the accessibility, and this was in the Weight of the Nation video. I'm not going to go into this other than saying I was once the nursing supervisor of the insurance company, the MSO that covered CHOC, which is in Orange County. And I love Orange County because nowhere in the United States do you see disparities like you see in Orange County, because you have people who live in the hills by the beach, and then you have Santa Ana. And Santa Ana has very similar outcomes to eastern Tijuana, right? So you really do have this huge disparity, and they talk about it in the video because they don't just talk about the food access, but they talk about the green spaces, right? They talk about the characteristics of the neighborhood. So it's not just what's the accessibility, how many grocery stores are there, but what's the walkability of the actual streets? Is the concrete all broken up and you can't even really safely walk if you wanted to? Are there crossing zones so that you can actually get across these huge highways that are more conveniently and appropriately put through low-income neighborhoods because wealthy neighborhoods don't want them there? So there's lots of different pieces to the accessibility portion. And then acceptability. This is the really important one, and this is kind of an extension of the video we just saw, and I'm not going to force you guys to see it again, but what role does the preparation time play in the acceptability of food? So how many people took 15 minutes or more to make their breakfast this morning? Okay. How many people took something for breakfast that came in a package and either ate it once they got to school here or ate it on the way? How many people didn't eat breakfast? You know why? Because you're busy students. And I assume you're not super wealthy. Maybe you are, but I remember being a student and it was kind of ups and downs depending on when financial aid came in. But if you wanted to, you could go buy a thing of Quaker Oats and make yourself some, rolled oats that take forever. Or you could even go get chia seeds and soak them overnight and make them for yourself and cut up some fruit and do all that kind of stuff, right? Like, how reasonable is that? You are nursing students. You are probably the most health-conscious group that you're going to find, right? But I do think this is, I know, right? It's a big leap. But I do want to make that point because it took me a very long time and different friends and a different, boyfriend for me to even understand how to cook vegetarian in a way that wasn't going to make me lose my hair, right? I mean, these are really big decisions, really big conscious decisions to eat a certain way and cook a certain way. And we have to ask whether or not this is going to be acceptable if they're leaving at 6 in the morning and coming home at 9. And that's just kind of their experience. So there's ethical issues that come up with food, with food deserts, with the economic piece. Of course, these are all able to be viewed through these nursing lenses that are really important to us. Like the fact that it is the most fair and equitable if everybody can access safe, healthy foods and have the opportunity to make healthy choices. We're a very wealthy nation, super wealthy nation, right? This would be most fair and equitable, and you would maybe see a difference in some of the health outcomes that are there. We as nurses should be committed to doing good for our patients by educating them about healthy eating. This is the big one for research. And advocating for better access, because we're a very wealthy nation. So there are resources that we should be really ensuring are available to our members, our clients, our patients, however you want to call them. And it's something we should be thinking about when we're talking about their treatment plan, when they leave, so that we're not saying like, well, do kale and brown rice, it'll be good for you. In 2 months you'll come back, you'll have lost all this weight. Okay, right? And then, of course, this is a big one. My father passed away in February of diabetes, of complications of diabetes. He was 56. And I've always respected his decisions. And I respect the decisions of my patients. I respect everyone's decisions. I do my best to make sure that I'm committed to educating them and providing resources if possible and pushing for things that I think are equitable. But I respect the individual and their choices, because I recognize, because I'm a nurse, I'm not a physician, I'm not a physical therapist. Those are great things, but they're not nursing. What differentiates me from all the other medical professionals or healthcare professionals that I interact with daily is that I look at the holistic being, and their mental health, their spiritual health, their emotional health is as important to me as their blood sugar. End. Right? And because I take that view, who is a great advocate? Who is the person who sits in the big community meetings that we have with other medical professionals who are talking about the A1C and says, yes, but I want to talk about the fact that they're in a wheelchair and the place you recommended them to does not have a ramp or access, right? That's the nurse's role. And I think it's something that we really need to think about, the fact that your creativity, your ability to look at research, your ability to really humanize the situation is what makes you unique as a nurse, and it's really where you can shine and make huge differences for people. So, case study. Tiffany, do you mind pulling up the case study?
And can we get 4 volunteers? Right?
Absolutely. Would anybody like to read? I would really appreciate it. Well, how about we do 1 and then 2 back there, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So you take 1 paragraph each.
Mm-hmm.
Martha D is a 69-year-old African-American woman who lives in a substandard cold water, 3rd floor walk-up apartment in a housing project with a high crime rate. She draws a small Social Security check that does not cover living expenses. Her income is supplemented by food stamps, housing assistant, and by working as a nanny for 3 small children for 20 hours a week. Ms. D earns a minimum wage for her job as a nanny and accepts cash for her work to avoid any interference with the Social Security check. She uses public transportation to go to and from her job, spending $3 each working day on bus fare.
Go for it.
Mrs. D helps her alcoholic single daughter, age 47, with 2 teenage children, especially when the daughter is experiencing a drinking binge. The children frequently stay with Mrs. D and rely on her for food, shelter, and love. Mr. D is an alcoholic and has not been home for 2 years. However, he does occasionally call from a homeless shelter or treatment facility. Neither the daughter nor Mr. D contribute to household expenses, but Mrs. D is very devoted to her family, especially her 2 grandchildren.
Yeah, go ahead.
Martha D is 5 feet and 8 inches tall and weighs 285 pounds. She has hypertension with her blood sugar ranging from 200/90 to 250/110. She's on medication for her blood pressure, and the physician has linked her with a county home health nurse to encourage on a diet and simple exercise regime for her obesity and hypertension. Ms. D is beginning to show signs of type 2 diabetes and has been encouraged to lose weight and adhere to a diabetic diet. In addition, Ms. D has some small ulcerations on her left ankle.
Yeah, go ahead.
The home health nurse visits Mrs. D and instructs her in the care of her ulcers, advising her to keep her left foot elevated as much as possible. The nurse spends considerable time explaining the 1,200-calorie diabetic diet and moderate sodium restriction to Ms. D, and talks with Ms. D about the need to begin walking as soon as the ulcers on her foot heal. Ms. D lets the nurse know she used to attend a weight control group and understands low-fat and diabetic diets. However, she says coming home to a nice pot of beans, fried chicken, and biscuits is her only daily pleasure. I've lived 69 years on this diet, don't wish to change, and have nothing to lose if I remain on it for the rest of my life. She also points out that it is not safe to walk in her neighborhood, so she stays inside. In addition, she indicates that she is too tired to exercise after working all day.
Oh, she's good at that.
Oh, great. There's some really interesting things in this case study. One of the things is there's some real hotly debated research about how much of a difference does exercise actually make. So if you're interested in this, it's something we can talk about. But to kind of keep focused on the diet, so considering her decisions to ignore these recommendations, right? Who decides what's good? If you are the nurse who's the home health nurse visiting Mrs. D, is it up to you to redirect her? Is it up to you to respect her decisions? How do you navigate that? Anybody want to try? There's no wrong answers here. This is all us kind of talking through the case.
And feel free to utilize one of those ethical principles or another ethical principle or a theory.
Because this will happen. You'll show up and you'll see a case. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think all that you can do is to try to give her all of her options that she has and make sure she's, like you said, like educated on everything that she can do to prevent like her type 2 diabetes, but it is ultimately her choice if she does or does not follow what you're giving her.
Yeah, definitely. How many people know how many calories are in one fried chicken breast? I mean, I don't know, but this is not a population I work with. But again, you definitely could look at where she's willing to budge and say maybe eat it once a week or something like that. Or you could say, well, it's this many calories. Let's look where we can find them somewhere else. So maybe there's some flexibility. Given what you said, I think it's true. You need to. Any other ideas? Feel free to be as creative as you want.
Also for like the exercise portion, since she can't leave her apartment, maybe like telling her whether or not she could do like yoga inside her apartment or like small aerobic exercises that could be done within her own home, so she wouldn't have to leave necessarily the building if she doesn't feel comfortable going outside. And then also perhaps getting her daughter involved, because it says that her daughter isn't involved currently and she is a drinker, so maybe finding her some options so that she could get better and help her mother and her children.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're looking at those ethical principles, which one does that most closely represent?
I feel like that would be the notices, because you're trying to like prevent harm by trying to give her alternatives and trying to prevent that, and also non-maleficence.
Great. All right. And so we got who decides what's good, right? Where are we seeing justice or the lack of justice in the implications that Miss D is, in the ultimate implications of her situation? Where is that playing out? Can you identify some factors in her story that are indications that maybe justice is not being consistent or equitable in this case? Yeah.
Like sometimes people with low socioeconomic status, the providers tend to give them less support because they're like not treating them fairly. But with justice, like you're supposed to treat everyone fairly, regardless of like background and like if she's in poverty or not. So maybe past providers have not done that, and that's why she came to these levels.
Yeah, it's possible, right? Did you have something to add?
Yeah, she said that the supermarkets weren't close enough to her, so obviously that's not really fair. That some people have access to like 10 different groceries and she doesn't have.
I thought it was interesting. Did you guys catch that she's like making money under the table?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you'll be surprised when you're out in the field at how little money people actually live on. There's some projects that you can do with public health where you try to follow one of these SNAP diets for a week and see how much money you're actually allocated through CalFresh or like food stamps type programs and see how little is. It's kind of interesting. So we already had a couple of different ways that you would approach Miss D about her health issues. Are there any other ideas on that? Any other things that you could do to, yeah, go ahead.
Well, she said like she was really tired like after coming home from nannying. If it's like little kids or I don't remember the age group or if it was mentioned, but like, you could just do like exercises with the kids, whether it's like hide and seek or like actual like exercise or whatever. So like that way she's like making money and like but also doing activities, physical activity.
Yeah, I mean, I think individualizing care and attention to a patient is always the right answer. And really listening and incorporating in the reality of their life into, honestly, the reality of which you know medically is recommended for that particular diagnosis, right? So it's a challenge, but those are really good ideas. Do you have anything else that...
No, if we just listed off the issues that the chapter talked about and then the case study, what are all of the things that were, what are any of the things that were mentioned in the chapter that are also woven into this story with Ms. D? Maria? Poverty. Okay, we got poverty, clearly. She's an older woman, yes. One more time. Her husband comes in and out of a homeless shelter, sometimes calling her from a homeless shelter. Good eye. Yes.
Maybe racism, as she is a minority African American.
I don't know if there was explicit evidence of racism there, but I think the point that the justice point, was that Yesenia that made that it's possible in the past, in her earlier years, because she's obviously made some decisions that have turned into habits that have been not good for her health, and she's pretty stuck in that. She's pretty stubborn about that. And sometimes that's because if somebody has been oppressed or someone has been shunned or shamed or ignored, they tend to do this, and they stick into their habits. And it's harder. I mean, I speak from experience, too, working in public health for many years and working with people where it really takes time to really listen to them and understand what their logic is telling them about why this is the right way for them to live. Anything else? Yes?
The children are also facing poverty.
Excellent point. So we've got children living in poverty. Right. Certainly it takes everything in the nurse, including assertiveness and communication strategies to be able to navigate this, because you don't want to be preachy. As you said, you can't just tell people what to do, so it takes all of your personality and who you are to literally connect with this person, and hopefully they feel respected, and then they have a higher chance of listening to you and actually making some actual change. So your personality becomes very important. But I think you also demonstrated for us, Adrienne, that your knowledge base, your knowledge base in relation to food deserts and food swamps, but decision-making, but also diabetes, and how to do some exchanges, ends up being this amazing tool for innovation, where you're able to, on the fly with a patient, problem solve and come up with a plan with that patient that could work with them. So every one of you is unique, with a unique personality and unique skills and talents and abilities. All of those things will come in handy in different ways with different patients. So I think you embodied that really well. And I found your presentation, I've heard it before, but this was extremely inspiring for me today. So let's thank Adrienne. She said she would stay throughout the break, so we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and if you have questions, you can talk with Adrienne, because then she'll take off after the break. So if you have any questions, this is your